Hey there, guys. This is Curse of the Sea Rats, $17.99 on sale as of right now, but normally it's going to be $19.99, which is a pretty decent price. And what is it? Well, it's a beautifully animated Metroidvania, which it dubs itself as a Ratroidvania because, you know, all the characters are rats, and it makes me think of like Five Goes West, which is something I definitely love from my childhood. So it's hard for me to pass up on something that looks that fun. What really drew to this to me, aside from the art, was the fact that you could co-op into it, and that's chiefly the reason why I picked it up pretty quickly, but also I'm a sucker for Metroidvanias. Now, if you're like me, and you're a sucker for Metroidvanias, but you're playing it alone, I might not recommend this. I don't think this is a great game. I don't think it is something that sucks, though, and some people have been a little overly critical for it. For something that's a $20 game, I think this is more than fair for what you're getting. I would be kind of pissed if it was a $40 game, and then I might feel like I might have gotten ripped off a little bit. The quality is not really there for something that expensive, but for 20, it's you know, it's a good deal, I think. I think you're really going to get value out of this if you're looking for a co-op Metroidvania experience. If you're not looking for that, you might not really find that the value is all here for you. The reason I say that is, again, it took me only about 10.4 hours to clear this thing, and that's including some side quests and presumably getting the good ending. You know, I have like 2.4% achievements, or like, so I know a lot of people haven't really done a lot in this game yet. So there's possibly secrets I've missed, there's possibly some things I haven't done, but I felt pretty satisfied with what I managed to do. So let me just play a little of this in the background. I will only have sound for this first video that I recorded because my other ones have me and my friend putzing around and making jokes and doing all that kind of stuff that wouldn't be necessarily perfect for the video. The story is kind of light. I'll just start with that since that's going on in the background. You kind of basically show up washed up as one of the prisoners on this boat. Someone else who's captured basically turned everyone to rats with some ancient magic mumbo jumbo, and you have to go and stop that to earn your freedom. You get to choose one of 4 characters, and if you have 4 people, you could actually do this 4-player. The devs were showing that off, and it looked kind of fun, if not chaotic. I did it 2-player, and it worked pretty well. Each character has different skills and abilities. They all have different magic elements. They all have a defensive button, which does different things. For example, Akane over here, who I use, does a parry. Bussa does a full-on block. Buffalo Calf has like a counter strike, so she'll dodge and then do an attack. David Douglas has a parry as well. And then they also have different dashes, which you unlock later, in addition to a double jump and a super jump. But for Akane, her dash is a dash backwards, which you can follow up with an attack, which you can also do a jump, do a double jump and then turn yourself around, dash backwards to get some extra air, which is nice. Bussa has like a sort of tackle forward, which reminds me of Wario. Buffalo Calf has a dodge forward, which gives you lots of iframes and lets you move across the screen way faster than anyone else, I think. And David Douglas also has a dodge forward, but it seems a bit slower. So all of them have like a different build that you will go through on their skill tree. There's not really a lot of meaningful choices you're going to be making. It's mostly just like what you want to get first. But they all seem to have kind of like a set build. Like Akane seems to be like a mixture between being able to use a lot of magic very often and decent melee abilities. Whereas Buffalo Calf has a lot more like backstab abilities and then like really good ranged attacks. And Bussa is more like the heavy hitter who can go in close and seems like he can take a beating and heal himself. So all of them have like a sort of different skill set, and they're all beautifully animated. They're all, I wish I could say beautifully voiced. Some of it does sound a bit rough, I'm going to be honest. I'll scroll forward a little bit here where I talk to all of them. So I think Buffalo Calf sounds fine. Bossa sounds fine. Like, they all sound fine. Some of the NPCs sound a little bit off. Akane, I don't know, sometimes her dialogue felt a bit stilted in delivery, but I'm not exactly sure, you know, what you might feel about it, but I definitely don't feel like it's professional grade stuff. It's okay. It's serviceable. I'm glad they voice as many characters as they do. Most of them have voice work done, unless it's a very inconsequential, like extremely background NPC. So yeah, that's kind of nice. As you can see, the animations are really pretty. It kind of reminds me of like Cuphead, where they did a lot of hand-drawn stuff. Comes out pretty nice. I think it's fairly fluid, but there are some problems with it. Let me turn down the sound a little bit here because I think I'm about to practice some combat. So one thing that's a little frustrating with like the ground combos is you get kind of locked in place when you start doing those, and it can feel like they don't really flow super well. Another massive problem, which I think would alleviate that locked in position, would be if the enemies didn't have contact damage. And I think that is the biggest sin this game has, is that there's contact damage on the enemies, and it just doesn't make sense because there's a lot of skills you get which sort of rely on you being really close. Even the characters that have more range attacks, you have skills which seem to imply you should be close. Oh, you can hear that. Let me. You can hear her voice, just because.
Wait, what's going on?
And then there's of course some clip dialogue, as you can see there. I don't think she has the best voice in the game, but I mean, it kind of grew on me. But I know some people won't be as tolerant of that. One thing that did kind of frustrate me is there's like a lot of clip dialogue or they wrote one thing and the voice says something else, so that could be a little bit kind of frustrating there. You can kind of see the quality's not all there. And here's like an example of the skill tree. One side's the physical, one side's the magical. You kind of get it. You get some basic increases like to your crit damage or to defense, and then you get certain abilities which actually change things. One that really peeved me though was this water shield, where you create a water shield around you that deals magic damage to nearby enemies. Now the range of this thing was usually close enough that if I was meleeing them, it was kind of working. But again, when you're getting that close to an enemy, you're often taking contact damage because they're going to do some annoying like charge through, or they're going to keep moving, or they're going to basically punish you for getting close. So most of the time, even on this character, you're kind of encouraged to kind of jump around and do pot shots when you can, or use your range attacks when you can, because those are far safer. And this character actually does extra damage when she's doing aerial attacks. So even more so, you're not encouraged to kind of stand there and play around with the parry. Even worse is, I'm not sure if this works for the blocking characters, but the parry seems broken. Multiple times I would try to parry an attack, and I knew how the parry timing was. It was a very generous timing. I could get it to work on normal enemies very easily. But when I tried to use it on bosses who were doing obvious charge attacks, I would just get blasted through with it, and it kind of just encourages you to never really use it. Even on normal enemies, I eventually just stopped really caring because it just was so inconsistent about when it would work. And here I was just kind of messing around to show off like the different, characters' animations. So you can see they are pretty nice. I do think they did a good job with that. Now I'm going to turn down the volume on this and open another one because, like I said, I recorded this with a friend playing as well, and we were chatting a little bit and just kind of jumping around. But one thing I did try to do is, like, here I can show off a little bit of the map. The map does get pretty big. Now let's talk a little bit about, aside from my combat issues, which I do think are there, and there are some like minor glitches, like sometimes you do like a jump pogo stick attack on Akane and it might not connect and you might just fall through and get hit by the enemy. Or sometimes if your friend is hitting the enemy and you do that jump attack, it seems like it might create this moment of hit stun where you're like, that's why you phase through. I'm not 100% sure if that was the case, but there's these little things like that that get frustrating. Now, that wouldn't be so bad if most hits you take weren't like devastatingly huge. Now, at first, the beginning of the game, that was really more of a problem where we were taking lots of damage. As you get further in, you can kind of walk into things without there being much of an issue. That does very little damage in comparison to like, attacks that are more obvious, like the enemy actually waving their weapon around, which I think is fair. And when I got hit by those, I was never too upset. It was just that I think the contact damage really just took away from the game. You should be able to stand near an enemy and be somewhat safe. When you're playing with a partner, since this is important, you notice that sometimes my friend there turns into like a little blue ball. Whoever crosses the screen threshold first basically just gets pulled along. That's fine. One really bad decision, or one of the few bad decisions they have, is if either of you ends up kind of off screen in a bigger area, it's going to kill you. So a timer pops over your head, and instead of just pulling you over to the other person, it just outright murks you on the spot, which I think is a terrible decision. Thankfully, whenever you die, you turn into a little ghost that your friend can hit. and then if they do that, you resurrect with some health, but not enough that you're gonna, you know, be able to take much or many hits at all. So that can be a little frustrating. I think that, you know, some of these design choices were just not really the best. But, you know, overall, there weren't that many bugs on release, so I'm okay with most of it. The only real bug I really ran into that was kind of annoying was we had played this in 2 sessions, and at one point we got like a bag upgrade, which made it so we could carry more potions. And then when we restarted and came back and played another day, that upgrade was pretty much gone. So that was kind of bad, you know. It was just a little frustrating. Overall, the game, you know, mostly worked though, so I'm not going to hold it too against it, especially since it released working pretty well. You know, the story with the comedy and everything, we definitely got a few chuckles out of it, but that's also because I was playing with a friend, and you know, we could each highlight things and talk about them and work off each other, and you know, that's all right. Music in the game, which is currently not playing, I just have some royalty-free tavern music in the background right now. Music in the game is okay, but pretty forgettable. There's no tracks that really stood out to me. I wasn't like getting hyped up or anything during any of the boss fights. The boss fights are all pretty varied. They do have these patterns that you're clearly supposed to engage with. In most cases, it just seemed better to just go all out and use all your attacks possible, because it was just not that valuable to really like play by the rules half the time. Because it felt like you could kind of get cheap hits, and you know, any hit would take you down quite a bit, at least early game. Later on, some enemies just died really fast, so I really couldn't enjoy them. It was kind of either that. It was either you just killed the enemy super easily as a boss, or you kind of struggled because every hit was really big, or there was some cheap thing going on. And I don't know, I felt like they could definitely do a better job balancing it. Maybe if they worried less about this pseudo RPG system of having you level up and they created more of a balanced experience, I think that might have worked better. Because I don't know, I ultimately felt like the leveling was a little bit shallow. It just kind of was like, okay, now I can finally do what my character's supposed to do. And even then, it was somewhat kind of frustrating. Yeah, like overall, the cast is good. The side quests are there. I wouldn't say that any of them are particularly enjoyable. Like, you mostly collect some random thing that's like way further on in the map than you'd expect, and then turn it into someone at the end, and you get some okay rewards, like some really powerful items that will buff you for like a fight if you really need that, or you know, the occasional useful item which is like, oh, this lets you have an extra orb of magic you can use for a little while. And you know, it was mostly like it was all right. There are some cutscene jumps and little things that just feel a little jarring in the game. I wouldn't say that it feels unfinished, but it definitely feels like it could be polished a little bit more if they really wanted it to stand out some more. The boss's characters are all pretty good in the sense that they all stand out, but I'm not going to say you're not going to find something terribly unique here. You know, there's like a Dracula rat. There's a rat whose gimmick is that he's short and everyone makes fun of him for it, and he's called Short Fuse, and you know, he has a giant ship that he attacks you with. And then there's 2 fat rats that, you know, that's their personality, but at least they are visually, you know, there and they stick out. And then there's also some random other bosses, like a giant octopus you encounter, and then there's also some little things where you get like a gauntlet where you walk into a room and like a bunch of enemies spawn and you just gotta fight them, which is all right. It creates some diversity in the gameplay, and I think that's helpful. Now, there are some choices that are weird though. You know, as you go through the map, there's like one quest with a leprechaun which you only get 3 chances to do, and it's a jump puzzle in a place where falling is an insta-kill. That one was a little frustrating, especially since I later find out you can get a super jump, which makes it way easier, and I didn't have it for that, so that was kind of annoying. Then there's a choice near the end of the game where you think you're fighting one of the last boss fights, and then it's like, nope, you gotta run all the way back to the beginning of the game, but you can't use any of the portals you've been unlocking throughout the game, because you know, you basically lose a magical item and you have to like run back. But even more specifically, you're not allowed to run back on a path you would like to take. Instead, there are these rocks that just show up without any rhyme or reason that block your way, and the game is like, you must go this other way, and it's not really intuitive. There's ways they could have made that work, especially since there's a skull you should be able to pick up that is relevant to the story, and he could have guided you there or done something to make it make more sense. And it feels really weird because all they really do is give you one extra boss fight because of this run back. Otherwise, it just feels kind of like a pointless, like 10-minute, escapade. It's not like it was a big deal. It was just a weird decision. Then another weird choice was there's a side quest where you basically free these prisoners, and they steal your gold. Like they get a free chance to knock you out, which is never something fun. It steals all your money, but it doesn't matter what point you're in the story. So we lost like 14,000 gold there. And I couldn't find them again. I didn't really care to look that much. But that was kind of annoying. Thankfully, gold barely matters, which is also another problem. You can buy potions and some miscellaneous items. There's a lantern you can buy, but I never even found where I was supposed to use that. So I don't know if it just automatically worked. I had bought it like earlier and I got a better lantern, and still I have no clue if I was supposed to use that for something or not. So it's a bit bizarre, to say the least. So there are questionable choices and things that just seem weird. There's treasures you pick up in the game, which just seem to have like a funny description. For example, one of them is a straw hat with a One Piece reference attached to it that you can read, but you can't like equip it or really do anything with it, that I found at least. I don't know if there is a reward for getting all the treasures or something. I know I didn't get them all, but it was cute to read them. Some of them did get a chuckle out of me, but overall it was kind of like I do think this game is enjoyable, but I do again think that that's because it was co-op, and because anytime I died to something silly like these explosive mosquitoes that filled an area, I could just get rezzed by my friend, and for the most part that made the game really easy. Also, this is a good farming area. When you get to this area, there's a little corridor you unlock where if you just keep blowing everything up, which we're showing right here in the map where we were about like halfway through, even though I blew myself up and made him leave the room, you get a ton of like souls or whatever they are in this, so you can kind of just farm this area up. We eventually kind of mastered the art of going through here, and we just leveled our skills up really quickly like this because we just, obviously if you find a place to farm and you've been playing games long enough, you're gonna be like, all right, I'm gonna take advantage of that. I do think I get some footage of a boss, so I'm gonna just quickly show that because I think that's worthwhile to look at. Just so you guys can get an idea. Yeah, here's one of the main bad guys who's like a spider rat for some reason. I don't know what he was before he got turned into a rat. But here you can kind of see what ended up being a really quick boss fight. They do have some attacks. You can see that, there's critical attacks going on. We're trying to have some sort of strategy. Like I jumped through the enemy. It's all right. We were a little bit over leveled for this. And I think it's active enough where it's not bad, but it definitely didn't engage me as much as I wish it did. There's games that do this kind of gameplay a little better. Like Dragon's Crown is one that I wish was on the computer. I could play that again because I think that was pretty fun. And yeah, you can see when you take a hit, it's pretty heavy even from something that's under leveled. But it was kind of inconsistent like that, and that's kind of like how the boss fights go. And here actually is the backpack we got, which was definitely a Dora the Explorer reference, which was cute. It said it increases the amount of items you can carry with you. That stopped working later, which was kind of frustrating. I don't know why that happened. Environments are varied enough. There's bogs, there's swamps. There are different types of enemies, like your heavy hitters, there's explosive enemies. It's definitely very pretty to look at. Unfortunately, playing through it, there are going to be things that are going to frustrate you. So yeah, I would say if you looked at this footage and you're seeing this and you're like, wow, this looks kind of cool, and I would love to play something with my friend or my significant other, I think this will be a good time for you. But if you're looking at this and you're kind of saying like, well, I have other Metroidvanias I want to play, I would recommend doing that. Even certain ones like Urza, which I'm going to review later, which is like a sort of Metroidvania that came out, well, I should say is in Kickstarter mode. I feel like that's a lot more fun, even though it's definitely not as well animated. It's not really, it's not really animated, it's got 3D models, but I think that one has gameplay that's more enjoyable, even though some of it feels a little more janky in some places. This one feels like it played it a little too safe, and it just didn't capitalize enough on making the combat really tight. It definitely could have done a little bit more. Let me reset some settings over here. So overall, yeah, I think I would give this like a 6 out of 10. I wouldn't give it anything really that much higher or that much lower. Some people are not recommending it on Steam, and I think that's a little bit unfair. This doesn't really deserve a mixed review. I think it's maybe mixed to positive. It was mostly negative at one point, because there's not many people playing it. But maybe check it out if you really love Metroidvanias. You got a friend that you want to play through with it. You know, you guys don't mind a game that's not too hard, but does have some moments that might feel cheap. You might have a good time. And heck, if you've got 4 friends, it might be a bit of chaos, but it might still be enjoyable. And there you can see that the roll is faster than even like kind of the sprint you can sort of do by crouching and doing a crouch movement. So yeah, overall, pick it up if you like co-op Metroidvanias. That's about it. See you guys.